Once upon a time there was a small woodland squirrel named Bucky. He lived a fairly pleasant life in the forest with his family until one day a terrible wood chipper accident claimed the lives of both his parents and all of his siblings. He was devastated and left alone to fend for himself. A local squirrel family offered to take him in, but in exchange for food and shelter, he had to scurry about constantly collecting nuts in order to feed them for the upcoming winter. He felt like a slave and wondered if his life would ever get better. Then one day, the princess of the nearby kingdom announced that she had finally decided to settle down and find herself a king. She announced that there would be a great ball and that all eligible young lads of the kingdom should join, and she would choose her husband there. When Bucky heard the news, he was thrilled. Can you imagine what it would be like to live as a king in the kingdom, with a beautiful princess as my wife? However, Bucky got dismayed as he realized what an impossible dream this was. How could he, a squirrel, ever impress the princess? He decided that it was an impossible dream and just continued to scurry about his day collecting nuts. However, to Bucky's surprise, a little fairy came by. "I'm your fairy godmother," she said. "I will grant you one wish, whatever you like." Bucky was shocked but pleasantly surprised, and thought for a second and then said, "I want to go to the ball and impress the princess." Said the fairy godmother. "I don't know how I'm going to snaggle this one. Well, wait a second." Then, with a sudden swish and swoosh of her wand, she turned Bucky into a dashing prince. "Oh, my word, look how lovely I look. Now, you'll hurry off to the ball and have a great time, but remember, when the clock strikes 12, you will turn back into a squirrel." Bucky readily agreed and scurried off to the ball to go impress the princess. Meanwhile, at the ball, the princess wasn't finding any of her suitors attractive. Then Prince Bucky walked in, and wow, it almost knocked her socks off. "May I introduce myself as Bucky?" "Oh, wow, you are the most handsome prince I've ever seen." "Well, would you like to dance with me?" "Of course." So they danced the night away, and just had the grandest of times. However, time slipped away from them, and before they knew it, the clock began to ring. With each strike of the clock, Bucky became more frantic. I'm so sorry, but I have a really important emergency." He left in a hurry and left the princess all alone, wondering what had happened. The only trace she could find of him was a small nut that had fallen out of his pocket. "What is this acorn?" Bucky made it back to the forest just in time, but was sad that his one night in paradise was at an end. However, the princess wasn't ready to give up on her perfect king yet. She decided she would search the kingdom high and low for the owner of the acorn. One day her travels took her to the forest where Bucky lived. She approached the small, nice-looking squirrel and asked, "Have you seen a young, strapping prince around here?" "Would you believe me if I said it was me?" The princess was shocked at this revelation. Bucky explained everything that had happened and asked if there were any way that she would still consider his hand in marriage. "Well, I suppose so. I always did have a fondness for squirrels, I suppose." This made Bucky very happy, and he proposed on the spot. Then they traveled back to the kingdom and ruled happily ever after. The end.